Hey everybody, welcome here to Musicians Edition. I'm Evan on the piano, and today we're going to be diving into relative pairs or relative keys here on the piano. So this is a continuation of my series that's been talking about scale degrees and chord progressions. You don't need to know too much about those to be able to get an understanding on relative pairs if that's the only thing you're interested in here. You do want to have an understanding of major and minor scales because otherwise this won't make too much sense to you. But we'll talk about relative pairs, what they are, how to understand them, and how you can use them in music too. So relative pairs or relative keys, these things are like family members or relatives that share the same set of genes. So it's going to be a pair of a major scale and a minor scale, and these two scales are going to be sharing the same key signature. And so key signature is just the 7 notes that make up the scale. So is it all white keys that they both use, or is it the same combination of whites with sharps and flats that they use? That's going to be these relative pairs. So again, a major scale and a minor scale, both of which use the same sets of notes, they just have a different tonic or that tonal center. So we'll talk about a lot of different ways to help you understand this and so that you can be able to use it as well too. So to begin to do that, let's go ahead and hop over onto the piano and take a look at these. All right, so we're going to start looking at C major. So that's typically just the starting point in any of these. C major, just because we can see it's all the white keys, as you should hopefully know. So C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back to C again. Those are our 7 notes. And we want to think about what is our relative pair. What is a minor scale that you might already know that only uses white keys? That minor scale that only uses white keys would be A minor. So for A minor, we start on A, and we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and back to A. And that's our A minor scale. So we have found 2 of the easiest relative pairs here. C major and A minor are a relative pair because they use the same set of notes. All the white keys, it's just we have a different tonic or a different starting point, that A versus that C. And that's what makes up these major versus the minor scales here. But same key signature, that's our first relative pair. Let's look at another.
This lesson is brought to you by the Musicians Edition practice book. Make goals and keep track of progress throughout the whole year. When you're done with this video lesson, don't forget to mark this practice time in your Musicians Edition practice book. Now back to the video.
Another we can look at is, let's start with E. From E, we can get the E major scale. That is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and then we come back to E again. Those are our 7 notes. And finding a minor scale that uses these notes, we can look no further than C sharp minor. C sharp minor is made up of C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, and B. Those are our 7 notes to C sharp minor, and you can see these are the same notes. So we have found our relative pair with E major and C sharp minor. So really the idea here is that every single major or minor scale has a relative, has that pair that shares those same genes, that same key signature that make up the 7 notes of the scale. So same exact notes for all of these, just a different starting point. So let's look at the table that's going to have all of them included on it. So this is the full chart for those who do want to see it. You can see every single scale is included. Every single note from C up to the next C, all 12 keys are included. Every kind of key signature you could find is included as well too. We have a major with the relative minor. These are not ordered from C to B like on the piano, how you would see it left to right, but it's ordered in terms of how many sharps or flats they are. So we start with none with C major and A minor, and we work our way up with the amounts of sharps and flats. But luckily, you don't need to memorize this list. We already have too many things that we are trying to memorize to learn these instruments. So we have easy tricks to be able to do this. So let's go ahead and look at just very easy ways to go from a major to that relative minor. So our very easy trick, and I hope you're not frustrated by looking at that super long table, our very easy trick to figure out how to get that relative minor from the major, how to find it out instead of racking our brain to find that same key signature. It's super easy. For C major, we start at C, and that A minor scale, to find out what that relative pair would be, we just go down 3 semitones. From C, we go down 3 semitones. So here is C. We're going to count down 1, 2, 3, and we made it. That is A. So we have gone from C major and we have found the relative pair. It is A minor. That is all you do for all of these. When you're at the major, you just count down 3 semitones and there's your relative minor. So we don't need that stupid table. We can use our brain and count to 3. So our other example was E in C sharp. Well, does that same trick work? Here's E. We count down 1, 2, 3, and we end up on C sharp. If you look at every single pair that was in that huge table, every single one has a major that is 3 half steps higher than the minor. That's all there is to this. And vice versa, if we are counting from the minor to the major, you just go up 3. So here's A, we can go up 1, 2, 3, we get back to C. Same with the C sharp to E. From C sharp, we count 1, 2, 3. It works both ways. So major to relative minor, count down 3 half steps. Minor to relative major, we count up 3 half steps. When you're counting, don't forget to count these black keys. They count the same as the regular white ones, so just don't forget that when you are counting these. And just one other way to look at this on the piano, if you are familiar with scale degrees, that's something I've been talking about recently on the channel, so always go ahead and look at those videos if you're interested. Scale degrees are great for learning about chord progressions and how scales are related to each other. Another way to look at it, instead of counting down 3, we could see that the relative minor, when you're in that major scale, is always the 6th scale degree or the 6th note in our scale. So that's what it was for every example we've looked at. So from C, the 6th note in the scale, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is A. So that is another way to find out where that relative minor is. It is that 6th scale degree or 6th note in that major scale. That's the relative minor. And vice versa, if we want to find it from that minor to the major, in that A minor scale and any of these minor scales, the relative major can be found on the 3rd scale degree or the 3rd note in the scale. So from A, the 1st scale degree or 1st note in that scale is A, 2nd is B, 3 is C. So that is our other way to find these out. If you're knowledgeable on scale degrees, it's another easy trick to kind of look at it as well too. So one more time, major scale, that relative minor is on the 6th. Minor scale, that relative major is on the 3. And for my last trick, our last visualization to be able to get an understanding of this if we're still struggling with it. I mentioned you did want to have an understanding of major and minor scales. Knowing the pattern of these is definitely a more fundamental aspect of learning the piano. So here's those patterns written out for major scale versus minor scale. So a major, we have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. For the minor scale, it's whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. So the reason we're going to talk about this. So in the major scale, we found that relative minor on the 6. So if we were to start counting this major scale pattern from the 6, what might we get? We would get whole, half, now go back to the beginning, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. And that is actually our minor scale pattern. You get that same pattern by just starting on that different number. So that's just showing how we turn that major into a minor and vice versa. Look at our minor scale pattern. If we start on the 3, which is where we could find our relative major, we get whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So that is showing you how we go from that major to minor, how that minor to major, and how this kind of makes sense. So we can just rearrange these gaps, pick that new starting point, and that's really how you end up getting the same pattern of notes between these. So again, same notes, just that different starting point or tonic. So that is pretty much every way I can think of to present this to you to help you understand it. That is relative pairs. We have these 2 sets of keys, one major, one minor, that share those notes. They also share the same chords as well too. But the thing is, when you hear it, it doesn't really sound like the same. Like you wouldn't hear E major in a song and versus C sharp minor and think it's the same notes. The thing that really sets the keys apart is that tonic or the tonal center, which is really interesting, that it's not really just the notes you're using, but really where they revolve around. You know, that tonic is what really sets the mood for the piece, because no matter what, that E major versus that C sharp minor or whatever sets of pairs you're looking at, one is still a generally happy major and the other is still a generally sad minor. So it's not really moods that match up too well. It really is just these notes, and you can see how the tonics really make the difference in how these keys are expressed. So the way this can be used, playing, songwriting, improvising, however you prefer to play the piano, a mix of whatever, a really common way to use these relative pairs is we'll start a song off in one of these keys. And a really easy way to get that mood switch, because we talked about one of these is still happy, one of these is still sad or darker. A really easy way to get a mood switch in a song, if you really want a happy to tense section, a happy to dark, or vice versa kind of section, and you're thinking of what creative ways can I do to get that, look no further than that relative pair. So if you're writing a song in E major, for example, and you want a bridge, you want the chorus, you want some kind of a section to sound darker or change up from the mood of the rest of the song, inserting that relative pair is a great way to do that. So you have your E major progression, you hit that bridge, and you switch over to a C sharp minor type of progression. And it's a really easy way to not have to think so far outside the box of using accidentals, of switching to something totally different. You still get to use the same notes, and you know this is something that's gonna work because you're not breaking out of the key or having to get so creative with your ideas of what to do for that section. You can use these same notes that you're already using in your song, just shift your tonic over, and that's a really great way to mix up the mood in your song. So many artists do this. The Beatles do it a lot, like in When I'm 64, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Strawberry Fields, among others by them. I've heard it in all kinds of genres. Justin Timberlake, Fleetwood Mac, Lady Gaga. It's, you know, all over for these songwriters who might be using this trick of relative pairs. And again, it's maybe that verse and the chorus are in a specific key, but then we enter a bridge where it's going to flip it around and introduce a different kind of mood for us, where that relative pair will come in, and then we flip it on back to our original key afterwards. So we could have that verse, chorus, E major, that bridge we switch over to that C sharp minor, come back again for another verse and chorus in E major. A really good mood switch right in the middle there, or sometimes it's that chorus where we start off that verse in a minor and we want that chorus to really be big, and we switch it over to that major for that. So that is relative pairs. I hope this is a trick you find useful in your piano playing. Have fun playing around with that, and we will see you next time.